The one thing I find equally fascinating and frustrating with the transfer window is how quickly transfer stories change from 1 minute to the next. And what I experienced during my live show, the West Ham Weekly on Monday night, typified just how transfer rumours changed so vividly. As usual, before I do a live show, I try to get myself the most up to date information about West Ham, trying to bring you the stories that are relevant, that are poignant, up to the minute. So I look at various websites, channels, social media, looking at the latest stories. I even have my usual chat with someone close to what's going on, far closer to what I am with everything at the club. And the latest, up until the time I went live on Monday night, was that there was definite interest in James Ward-Prowse and Edson Alvarez of Ajax. But within an hour of going live, and whilst I was still on the show, news broke out that we'd put in simultaneous bids for two other players, Scott McTominay and Conor Gallagher. However, the fascinating and the frustrating part, it was how quickly the landscape changed on the Gallagher story. The first that came out was that we made a bid of £37 million plus £3 million in add-ons. Then that was followed up by Chelsea having turned down that offer because they had a bid of 45 million by Everton for the player back in the January transfer window, which Gallagher refused to agree to. Then it transpired that the West Ham bid wasn't made on Monday evening, but it was made sometime last week. And then we heard West Ham wouldn't make an improved offer. Absolutely not. That's as far as they would go on £37 million, which was immediately followed up by West Ham making an improved offer of around £42 million plus add-ons. And now, dependent on what social media channel you follow, what ITK you listen to and believe, there will either be a standoff between the two clubs because West Ham don't want to offer any more money, or there are going to be further discussions to negotiate an agreeable fee. So either way, if Chelsea want between 45 to 50 million pounds for the player, we don't seem to be that far off, to be quite honest with you. And we might find ourselves finally doing some transfer business in this summer transfer window. I like Gallagher. He looked good when he was on loan at Crystal Palace, and he's just the sort of midfielder who could add some pace and energy into our West Ham midfield. At 23 years of age and with just 2 years left on his current Chelsea contract, he'd make a decent signing and he could be a good backup. He'd be a good addition to the squad. But would a deal for Gallagher come at the cost of maybe losing Pablo Fornals, or is he going to be a replacement for Manuel Lanzini, who's already left? We then heard that an undisclosed verbal offer had been discussed between West Ham and Man United for defensive midfielder Scott McTominay. But whatever the verbal fee was, it was also considered not to be enough because Man United consider Scott McTominay to be valued at something like £45 million. So what's happened to the supposed preferred interest in Alvarez and Ward-Prowse? Well, by the sound of it, it looks like we're making or have made a 25 million approach for Ward-Prowse and are seriously considering a bid of around 35 million for Alvarez. So it looks like what we're doing is we're going all guns blazing from virtually nothing in the summer transfer window to all of a sudden making bids for 4 players. Now, there could be another little twist because Daichi Kamada, his move from Eintracht, well, he's a free agent. His move to AC Milan has fallen through. And given that he's a free agent, Moyes might be very tempted in making an offer to the player who impressed him during our semi-final game in the Europa League last year against Eintracht Frankfurt. Now, of the 5 players, there are 2 things that might go against Alvarez and Kamada. That they don't have our required homegrown, they don't match our homegrown criteria. We do need British players to keep our homegrown criteria up to the level that's required in the Premier League. And also, Given that Moyes is so keen on players having Premier League experience, neither Alvarez nor Kamada have this. So would that mean that David Moyes would not consider these two players? I don't know. To be honest with you, the two players are decent, would complement any Premier League team, and it would be rather short sighted of Moyes to be dismissive of their lack of Premier League status. So, of the five players, which midfielders are the better ones? Let's compare the two defensive midfielders first, Alvarez and Mctominay. As mentioned, Mctominay, 26 years of age, apparently valued at 45 million by Man U, whereas 25-year-old Alvarez is available for a fee of around 35 million pounds. So he's 10 million pounds cheaper, Alvarez. I spoke about him in detail in the West Ham Weekly Show on Monday night, where I described him as a player with bags of energy, good physicality, covers a lot of ground. His positioning and movement makes him a great blocker, a player who breaks up the play with his tactical positioning, a proper no-nonsense defensive midfielder. As for Mctominay, he's got a physical presence as well, not altogether sophisticated, but a player who uses his build to be imposing against the opposition. And when playing counter-attacking football, he's exactly the type of player who'll get into the opposition's faces and breaks up their play. He's fairly composed, but does nothing really fancy with the ball. But when you compare the two players' stats, then there's kind of really only one winner. And that would be Alvarez. He seems to be worlds apart, coming out on top in just about every area. Better pass accuracy, ground duel success rate, clearances, interceptions, blocks, etc. are all topped by Alvarez, with the only exception of aerial duel success rate going to Mctominay. So now that we know verbally that we can't afford Mctominay in the bid, whatever bid it is we made, and he'll be more expensive than Alvarez, I believe that West Ham are likely to pursue their interest in Alvarez rather than Mctominay. But I guess we'll see what will happen. So what about Gallagher, Ward-Prowse and Kamada? How do they compare? Well, we know Gallagher is the youngest at the age of 23. As I said, valued between 45 to 50 million pounds by Chelsea. Ward-Prowse, being the oldest, is valued at 40 million by Southampton. And Kamada, in the middle, 26 years of age, and he's a free agent. He won't cost West Ham anything apart from a signing on fee. As mentioned, I like Gallagher's engine. He's a decent player who could only improve over time, but Chelsea may be asking for too much money in their bid to raise funds to buy Brighton's Caicedo, who Brighton value him at a similar price to Declan Rice. Ward-Prowse is obviously one of the best set-piece takers in the Premier League and would undoubtedly get any team at least half a dozen goals or more in any season. But he lacks pace, which is something that West Ham was woefully short of in midfield. And additionally, West Ham would only make an initial bid of around 25 million, whereas I've said Southampton want an awful lot more than that. Kamada, a clever footballer, helped to dismantle our endeavour to reach the final of the Europa League last year by scoring a fine goal. He's a clever footballer who operates in the hole just behind the striker. Again, not a lot of pace, but could be a great foil for a player like Scamacca. So what about the stats? What do they say? Well, when you look at the stats, Ward-Prowse marginally edges it when it comes to things like pass accuracy, chances created, ball recoveries, and so on. But it's Gallagher who could edge it over time with a better shot accuracy rate and ground duel success rate. And like I said, of the three, he possesses the better engine in midfield, which would be most welcome at West Ham. So for me, if you want pace, it's got to be Gallagher over the other two players. If our summer transfer window started to shape up with the likes of, say, Alvarez for 35 million, Gallagher for 45 million, that's 80 million. Throw Borges in at 15 million, that's another that's 95 million. Truffert at left back to replace Creswell would be another 15 million. That's 110 million. And then in the central defender, such as maybe Harwood Bellis, for around about 15 million. So you're spending about 125 million in total. of which 105 of that comes from the sale of Declan Rice, and the other 15 million or so from the sale of Vlasic and Cresswell, then that wouldn't turn out to be too bad a summer transfer window. Bringing in 5 players at an average age of just under 22 could be pretty decent business overall. But it depends to see. Now it all depends on what will happen next. I'm sure there's going to be breaking stories happening throughout the week. Like I said, I started off my Monday show talking about Alvarez and Ward-Prowse, and ended up talking about Conor Gallagher and Mctominay of Man United. Let's see what comes up next. If you're new to the channel, do hit the like, subscribe, and bell notification to let you know when I'm next on. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all pretty soon.